60 of the ITSM crowd. We're joined today by Dr. Chris Williams, who's a lecturer at Durham University, and we're going to be talking about innovation in consultancy. So how the field of consultancy is changing. If you're looking at a career in consultancy, what you need to be considering, or maybe if you're working as a consultant at the moment, what some of these changes and these innovations in the field mean for you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is ask Chris to introduce himself. So Chris, please, if you could just tell everybody who's watching a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thank you, Claire, and it's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Chris Williams, currently at Durham University Business School in the UK. And before I moved into academia, I spent the best part of 20 years in industry, mostly in information systems services and information systems management in different types of companies, mostly for American companies in the UK and a little bit in Germany as well. And the 1990s was a tremendous time, obviously, for the development of not only the technology, but also growth in the industry. And, later on did a PhD, moved into academia. Most of my research and teaching is in the fields of international strategy and international management. But since I've been at Durham, I've also been doing work in management consultancy. And we actually teach this as a topic on our MBA programs here at Durham. It's not the only thing that I'm researching and teaching, but it's been a big part of it. And I found the field intellectually very interesting, as well as something that's got practical implications and practical resonance as well with our students. Particularly people that aspire to be management consultants or go into professional service firms around the world. It's certainly a fascinating industry. It's a large industry. It's a highly diverse industry. I think it's perhaps more diverse than many people appreciate. People may have an impression of a typical consultant, male, wears a suit and tie, works for one of the big kind of organizations. We've all got these sort of stereotypical impressions. But the reality is consultancy is not like that globally. And it's become very, very diverse, quite fragmented, and a lot of blurriness in the boundaries between different roles within the consulting sort of industry. And of course, perhaps everybody knows this, but just to re-emphasize the point that the role of information technology, information systems, and communications technologies, software side as well as the hardware side, is a massively important role to play in organizational transformations. So, you're a consultant going in to advise managers on strategy at a strategic level, or you're going into advice on human resource management or marketing, or perhaps on the operations and manufacturing side. There's nowhere that IT doesn't affect. And so it's really important for our consultants to have a grasp of what's going on in the IT space, and either work in partnerships with other companies who can actually execute and deliver projects to make their clients satisfied, or abilities themselves. So I think part of the blurriness in the industry has also been due to the rise of the role of IT in actually executing and delivering effective solutions for clients. Yeah, I agree. So Chris and I have done some work together in the past. I've gone in and done some work with Chris's
MBA students in the management consultancy stream, because one of the things that I've tried to do is create a virtual consulting practice and kind of build some innovation in that way. So Chris and I have kind of done pieces together for a few years, but what's inspired me to invite Chris on is the publication of this book. So Management Consultancy for Innovation, which is out now. So this is Chris's book about the trends in the industry. Coming from academia, it's impeccably written, it's impeccably researched. So what I thought we'd do is bring Chris on and just chat a little bit about what he's found as part of his research. And you will be able to, if you wish, ask questions live to Chris during the session. So if you're watching this live, you can use the YouTube comments feature and we'll be able to see those questions coming up and we can pick them up and we can answer them. So by all means, please do ask questions if you're watching this live. If you're on catch up, you can contact us via social media through ITSM Zone or through Twitter, which is mine at Claire Agutter. But Chris, I think first of all, if we can start by just talking about the background for the book. So why did you feel that this was something that needed writing right now?
Right, yes. And, coming to the comment I made, just now about the amount of change that's happened in the consulting industry, a lot of it has been underpinned by innovations, many of which consultancy firms themselves have some kind of control over. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a question of consultancy firms having to sort of respond to the disruptive and innovative environment that happens to be out there. Somebody else comes up with the innovations and we as consultants have to somehow understand them, go into clients to implement them. It's some kind of, we are the bearers of knowledge and new things based on somebody else's innovations. It's not necessarily the case. And it's, what I found was that the consultancy firms themselves are very, very important sources of creative and innovative solutions, not only for clients themselves. It's a growing industry, it's a diverse industry. I made those points already, but it's also very, very competitive and continues to be very competitive in good times and in bad. And clients out there sometimes find it quite difficult to, differentiate between what makes a good consultant that's sort of going to help me and one that isn't going to help me effectively. And so, given that the competition to win clients, it's important for the consultancy firms themselves to innovate as well. We see that, for example, in the emergence of digital practices within large management consultancy firms. That's been pretty standard now in companies like Deloitte, PwC, clearly Accenture, even McKinsey. Going back 10, maybe 15 years ago, these whole practice areas didn't exist. So that's a kind of a large sort of structural innovation that you see commonplace across the industry. And given this sort of phenomenon and this acceptance that consultancy firms need to innovate, and as I said, I found myself in a situation here at university where we're teaching this. You go into the research to look at what's out there, and I was really surprised to find there wasn't anything out there in terms of a book or a definitive piece of work that provides a way of making sense of innovation within the consultancy space. There have been some studies here and some studies there, and sometimes the academic studies are quite narrow and focused on a particular question. That question may be to do with leadership or knowledge transfer or something like that. But I didn't really find anything that kind of brought it together. Now I've tried to, I've now put my, tuppence worth, so to speak, into the mix on this particular topic. There are lots and lots of books out there on management consultancy, and we have them in our libraries here, and our students are asked to cover them. And there's some very, very good books out there. But I was surprised to see a lack of attention to this question of in this particular type of professional service environment, how should we even approach the question of innovating? How do we know that this consultant has innovated for me. It could be the case that he or she has used this framework, used this idea, used this solution many times before with other clients around the world, or they've just tweaked something, but it's not really an innovation. So there are question marks around this capability. And anyway, the idea of the book was to sort of reflect on this phenomenon and to write it up and to put it down and get it out there and see if it could be used in class for teaching purposes, and also see if it could be used in practice, because I've written it in such a way, even though it's got a large academic reference list to it, and a lot of the things that I found out are based on the literature. I've written it in such a way, hopefully, that educated practitioners will be able to get around their heads around it as well. So that was the sort of the background to the book. In terms of the way I approached it, given the sort of multi-dimensional nature of this and somewhat complex nature of this, it's important to come up with some kind of framework, some kind of way of structuring things.
Yeah.
And I decided to adopt what I've called a capital approach. So looking at different forms of capital.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we've got human capital, for example. We've got social capital, and we've got different forms of organizational capital. Let's pick them, one by one. Human capital, big theory behind it, but also lots of studies that I found that looked at the relationship between human capital and innovation.
Yeah.
Sometimes in non-service industries, many times in non-service industries, but sometimes in professional service settings too. So there's a body of work there on human capital. We need to be trained. We need to have expertise. We need to be able to absorb new knowledge and make sense of that knowledge as trained and skilled professionals if we are going to innovate, if we're going to be able to come up with something new and work out how we can actually deliver something new. Yeah. So there's whole stuff on human capital. And the next sort of aspect I looked at was social capital. The consultancy industry thrives on the relational aspects of its connections with clients. Sometimes obviously consultancy companies also work with other service providers in teams. That happens as well. Yeah. But our relationships, particularly with clients, are absolutely vital. They are the source of renewed work, for example. We want to build trustworthy relationships with our clients. We want to be able to keep learning from our client in terms of opportunities, where new opportunities may lie for business. So we've got this very important social capital aspect in this industry as well. And I argue, again, through some literature review and some casework in the book, that social capital can be a source of value useful for innovating too. Yeah. Okay? So those ones are fairly standard sort of ideas and logics within the research field. The third one I picked was, let's call it organizational capital. In fact, I call it organizational capital. And this is all about how we organize things and how we go about delivering things as organizations, and whether those ways of working and those ways of organizing can be valuable to us as we try and innovate. Okay. And I break this down into 3 areas. These are areas that people like yourself have alerted me to, Claire, to be honest with you, and others that I've met since doing this in Durham. One area is about what I've called consultant virtualization, or doing things, online. Very interesting way of organizing work these days. More and more people are working from remote locations. We've got the whole offshoring and offshore outsourcing sort of phenomena going on. The fact that we're all interconnected with this great sort of technology. But what does that mean for us to be able to innovate as consultants? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are the pros? What are the cons? And I discovered a lot of literature on that topic, and include that in as well. The next one I looked at was the nature of the life cycle and research on how we do projects with clients, because life cycles have also been disrupted over the years. We no longer live in a sort of a hard paradigm where all projects have to be linear all the time for all purposes. There's also an emergent soft paradigm out there, and a growing recognition with people that rethink project management constantly in the academic world, at least, revisit the idea of what project management is, to look at the soft paradigm as something that's useful for innovation too. So the question is, how to balance hard and soft methods, when to disrupt the way that you actually work with the client in order to derive an innovative outcome. So there's that aspect of disrupting life cycles, and the third aspect of organizational capital that I look at, I called reflective ability, which is and this is a really tricky one. I found it also in the literature, but also conceptually, but also in practice. The ability for a consultant, if you like, to take time out to sort of stand back from a client and reflect on what's going on in order to come up with a new creative solution for the client, for the industry, and maybe for the consulting company themselves. Now, one of the problems in the industry, or one of the features, we should say, maybe not a problem in the industry, is the fact that consultants want to be billed. They want to be paid, right? We all, we everyone's got a mortgage to pay, etc., etc. Everyone wants to retire young or whatever. Anyway, we want to be paid. So, consultancy companies push their consultants to be highly utilized, billable. So if we're constantly taking our consultants, back from the clients, back to the office or off to a golf resort somewhere in order to do a big brainstorming, reflective session with lots of post-it notes and flip charts, the client could be scratching their head saying, hey, what's going on here? Am I paying for this? And if they're not paying for it, then the consulting company is paying for it. So we've got this sort of trade-off when we talk about this reflective ability, but it's grounded in learning theory. And when I got into this chapter on reflective ability, some very interesting sort of things popped up. You do see it in healthcare. You do see it in other forms of services, even in some areas like teaching, for example. Teachers having a sort of a day off once a term or something like that. Your kid's not going to school today because it's a teacher's day where they will be doing some stuff and working out some new solutions or what have you. So you do see it in other areas, also in architecture firms and some other professional service firms as well. I found some evidence of that. So the approach to the book was to look at this question of innovating in the consulting industry according to these 5, what I call poles, 2 of which are quite well-known ones, social capital, and the other 3 are related to organizational capital. In other words, the virtualization, the disrupting of life cycles, and thirdly, this thing about reflective ability. So I did sort of 5 chapters on each of these things, each one bringing in some case material and some examples. And Claire, you made a really interesting contribution in terms of the virtual consultant virtualization chapter. So thank you very much for that. But then at the end of the book, I needed to bring it together. And what I found when I looked at some examples of cases, and I've got 4 cases reproduced in the back of the book, was that I profiled each of these cases according to these 5 dimensions. And I used like what I've called an innovation radar. So imagine a radar with these 5 points. And sort of plotting my interpretation of this story on this radar, and some have got broader. Brilliant! There you go. There's an example. So some are I've got sort of these broader plots, and some have got sort of narrower plots, and then that makes you think, because if the consulting organization is going to be hard, what is it doing? it's investing a lot in human capital. It's investing a maximum amount in social capital. We're all out there networking with clients and others. It's all of its consultants are virtualized in cyberspace. It's constantly disrupting life cycles, and it's spending a lot of time at the golf club reflecting on life. It doesn't happen. It can't happen, right?
Yeah.
You end up with a situation which is probably going to be quite complex and messy and difficult to manage. Okay? So the back end to the book and the concluding aspect of the book, where I discuss different scenarios, is basically to say you have to think strategically about what you want to achieve as a consulting firm, as a consulting organization, level of innovation. And if you want a lot of it and you want it, continuously all the time, both for yourself and for your clients, then you have to find ways of managing complexity across all of these poles. If you don't want that, if you want to have sort of less of that, then again, your profile will be slightly different. But the fundamental point is that consulting control themselves. These are like levers that they can adjust, and they need the right sort of managerial talent to do that. So that's the essence of the core idea of the book. And when we think about innovation in consultancy like this, in terms of these organizational, human, social capital and organizational forms of capital, we also have some implications for ethics, for example. I'll make some comments about ethics in consultancy. Okay. It's an industry that's been somewhat criticized on that side with some very high, well-known scandals and things like that. And also some implications for careers and for students, like our students that want to go into the industry, but also people, perhaps in related areas or in client organizations that want to go into the consultancy industry as well. So anyway, that's the sort of the background to the book.
Thank you. So I think the thing that really interested me as well is that when I was reading through the book, I could see overlaps in the management consultancy thinking with the developments in the technology world. So looking at things like building Slack into organizations so that people have actually got time to reflect, building a learning organization, moving to more agile ways of working. All of these things absolutely reflect the trends we're seeing in the technology industry as well. And I think most of the successful consultants that I know in this industry are very much one foot in the technology camp and one foot in the management camp. I think that the real specialist kind of, I'm an ITIL consultant, we don't see so much of that anymore because you have to see the big picture. So I guess one of the questions that I wanted us to reflect on a little bit is, what does this mean for people who are maybe working as consultants, who want to be consultants? Is this a significant change in mindset that they need to adopt?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you may have people coming from a more of an IT or tech background. Maybe that they've got some sort of diploma or degree or first qualification in a technological engineering oriented background, and they've been involved in coding or technological projects at a certain stage of their career. They want to go into a more managerial consulting firm or sort of environment. And I think what's important to stress, to sort of balance, let's put it in terms of IQ and EQ, if you like. Our consultants tend to have these great social skills, the successful ones. They tend to be able to persuade very well. They're very good at communicating with clients, developing strong, bonding relationships with clients.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that not only do we do that sort of EQ type of stuff, but that we can also deliver and that we can provide the benefits to our clients that we're promising, and that increasingly relies on technological change. It's very difficult to deliver new strategies, for example, or even operational enhancements and some of those other functional areas I mentioned earlier, without looking at the latest technological trends and how we can work in partnership, often with others, in order to actually deliver. So I think one area that people coming from a more IT or tech background need to consider themselves is, to what extent do I have a deficit in certain areas in consultancy personally? I've faced this in the past as well. A lot of people do. And I almost like look in the mirror or work with others or work with HR people and say, what is my deficit? Do I have experience on those softer relational types of skills that are needed? So that's the sort of human capital, social capital aspect. And good consultants tend to have a mix of both of those things. But the research I did, and that's in the book, also has got this organizational culture stuff. And it gets a little bit more blurry there. It's almost like a third dimension. It's not just about EQ, IQ. I've got my technological knowledge and base and capability, and now I can also relate, communicate, and build relationships, enduring relationships with clients. Great. We also have this thing about organizational capital and the ability of the individual to identify organizations that they want to work in. That are aligned with their own career goals and aspirations. Do I want to work in a virtual environment? Do I want to work where I'm in an organization where I'm 100% utilized? Or do I want to work in an organization that tends to do this reflective stuff? So organizational capital can also be a way in which you can profile employers that you may want to work for in the future as well.
That makes perfect sense. Now, that's gone really, really quickly, but we're coming to the end of our 30 minutes. So we always try and finish up with some tips and some resources so that people can go learn a little bit more. So if you've got anything that you'd like to share, now would be the time to do that, please.
Yeah, there's a few things that I've used in the book and in my teaching here that could be relevant to the ITSM community. There are lots of websites. I tend to use one called Consultancy.uk. These type of websites have a lot of reports and information about general trends in the industry, what's happening in different parts of the industry in terms of segmentation, but also in terms of different countries around the world. Sometimes those overall trends can tell you where there's growth and where there's opportunities. And particularly if you're globally mobile, or able to operate in different cultures and countries and segments, it could give you some clues about where opportunities lie. The Institute of Consulting in the UK also has a new journal called Management Consulting Journal. You can go online and download that and have a look at that. And that's got some very useful analytical works in it, I believe, which could be relevant to people getting their head around the industry and different facets of the industry. And I'd also like to do a shout out to Professor Joe O'Mahony at Cardiff Business School, who's got a very, very good set of offerings called Consulting Mastered. And you may want to Google that and look at what he's doing. These are offerings which are like training courses offered in different formats to allow people to prepare for entering the consultancy industry. I do think that he's developed a very good set of resources there. So those are some ideas.
That's perfect. Thank you. So I'm just putting the title of the book again and a reminder so that you can check that out if you want to. The book's available via Amazon and I'm sure all good retailers. I would like to say a huge thank you to Chris for joining us today. It's nice to get kind of a different perspective on things and occasionally look at the trends that are happening outside of our service management world. We do have our November episode scheduled as well. So November the 12th at 8 a.m. GMT, we are going to be talking about the results of the 2019 Global SIAM survey. So looking at service integration, looking at sourcing, all those kind of things. We're going to be joined by Kinetic IT, who sponsored the white paper. So Michelle Major Goldsmith, who's one of our regulars, and some of our colleagues are going to come and talk to us about SIAM there. But for today, I would like to say a huge thank you to Chris for joining us. It's been really, really interesting to hear a bit more about what's happening in the consultancy world. And I will see you all on the next episode of the ITSM Crowd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.